You're listening to Thunder Quack Podcast Network. This is the Thunder Quack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunder Quack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunder Quack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunder Quack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com. You can get it early every Tuesday on patreon.com/thunderquack, or you can get it late over on podcast services across the galaxy every Friday. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Kunkin.
Amanda is sick.
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm so sick.
Usually it's me. Usually I'm the one who's powering through.
I have been sick. Like, I remember trying not to get sick back in November. Like, I've been very good all winter, and now it hit me on the butt. So it sounds like it landed square on your chest. Yeah.
And I tried really hard on short notice to get a co-host substitute in here, but
have to listen to me.
It's like this is apparently like the most the busiest, most social Monday in the calendar year, because everybody's got something to do tonight. It was like I went through quite a few people, and everybody was like, "Oh man, I got plans. Oh, I got this thing. Oh," so everybody had a good reason.
I'll just try to drink more tea.
Yeah,
be better.
That'll help. So this will be a little bit of a shorter episode for our second episode back. We're already off the rails, but that's fine.
Quality content.
So we're going to talk about a few things on this episode. We're going to talk about somehow we didn't last week talk about the Super Bowl Marvel Disney Plus spot with the little clips of all the different stuff coming on Disney Plus. We're going to talk about, what was the other thing we were going to talk about? I remember what the main thing is, but there was one other thing that I said.
You were going to talk about how Sonic is doing.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have an update on Sonic because that movie is kicking butt at the box office, and then Picard, and then we're gonna talk about The Good Place.
I haven't watched Picard, so I feel it's not spoilery except for The Good Place. So
yeah. Cool. So let's talk about these MCU shows on Disney Plus and this sneak peek that we got to see. It happened during the Super Bowl. It's like a 30-second spot. It is nothing, but it's everything. And we got to see
WandaVision. I'm so excited.
We got to see some really cool stuff from WandaVision, which is looking like it's going to be a very interesting show.
Can I just say, in true Amanda fashion, I didn't understand that it was a show about Wanda and Vision. I'm such a idiot. Honestly, I thought it was I don't even know what I thought it was. And then I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, I'm so here for this. I'm very excited.
So for those who don't know, WandaVision is going to it's kind of a loose adaptation of a couple of stories, or 3 stories actually, 3 or 4. There's a little bit of a House of M flavor in there. There's a story very recently, I don't know what it was called, but it happened fairly recently, where Wanda basically creates a pocket dimension to live in, because the real world is a bummer. And then there's
true to my heart. A girl true to my heart.
And then there was a solo series starring the Vision a few years back that's actually very heavily influencing this as well. That was about Vision. He basically created a family. He built, because he's a robot, he built a robot wife and robot children. hijinks ensue. Hijinks involving murder.
Robots doesn't seem like a good enough word to describe Vision.
Sure. Automaton, android. I don't know. He's Vision. Everybody knows the deal. I'm just using robot as a shorthand. So yeah, it looks like post Endgame that Wanda has either chosen to use her powers, or her powers are kind of doing this on their own and she doesn't realize it at first. But they've created like a pocket dimension that is modeled after sitcoms. So if you look really closely in the few scenes that we've seen, the living room that they show her in, like, so that we kind of see her through all these different time periods. They're all like famous TV living rooms, like Growing Pains and Brady Bunch and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and to see what they use as their inspiration in those areas, like in those different time periods. And then the other part of it is that in the comics, Wanda and Vision have 2 kids, and there is, in one scene, there's 2 cribs and 2 soothers pop out of the cribs. So that, like, we're gonna actually get to see those characters in the MCU, and I don't know if it's a spoiler to talk about their kids, because we don't know if the MCU versions will be the same as the comic books, but like their kids are a big deal in the Marvel continuity, and have been on different teams and that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know. It's really exciting what they could be setting up, because there kind of no rules in this pocket dimension, because Wanda's powers are kind of off the scale, and her primary power source, even though she got it from the I guess that's the Mind Stone. Yeah, it was the Mind Stone that gave them their abilities. Wanda's powers actually are derived from the Reality Stone, which is why it's like the red sort of liquidy mist when she uses her abilities. And Quicksilver's powers were the Space Stone, the Tesseract, which is why he was able to move fast, right? And why it was blue when he did it. So, seeing how that translates and everything, and how the because the Infinity Stones have all been destroyed at this point in the MCU timeline, but she's the only one left as far as, well, no, I guess that's not true. Captain Marvel also has Infinity Stone powers. So the 2 of them have their powers from the Infinity Stone, but she can alter reality the same as the Reality Gem. So, yeah, I'm really excited for that. But before that comes out, and actually it got pushed. It was pushed up. It was supposed to come out in early 2021, but it's actually going to come out, I think, in November. Awesome. And they moved up Falcon and the Winter Soldier to August, which I think it was originally sort of rumored that it would be like a September-October thing. And don't expect these shows to be as big as, I mean, like, it's hard to quantify this stuff. There won't be as much content as there is with The Mandalorian, which has, what does The Mandalorian have?
8 episodes.
Is it 8 episodes? Oh, it might actually be about the same, because there will be 4 episodes of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I don't know if we have a number on WandaVision
4
yet.
Episodes? Yikes.
Yeah, it'll be 4 episodes, but it's 4 1-hour episodes, 1-ish hour.
Just making kind of a movie.
It's a mini series, right?
Yeah,
like it's yeah, but it is basically just like an extended movie.
Dude, did they announce The Mandalorian's also coming back in like early November or something like that? Like
they
they're getting
did,
to it really fast.
Yeah. So at the end of season 1, they confirmed that we already knew that season 2 was happening. Season 2 got picked up before Disney Plus even launched. So yeah, but we were kind of speculating that it would be in sort of the late Q3, Q4 area, and then they did kind of drop that it'll be October, November of 2020, I think. So yeah, do we have an actual date?
That's very fast.
Yeah, well, they were already working on it, right? Like when season 1 was airing, they were filming season 2. So
okay. Sure.
Yeah, and then on top of it, if you haven't seen any of the behind the scenes stuff, there's a few videos that have been posted of the volume, the set that they used to shoot this stuff. And if you see how that technology works, you can see how they're going to be able to do this so quickly, because that tech is allowing them to just they're basically using video game environments to create these sets, and then the characters are just standing in this space and kind of reacting and doing their thing. So it's not like they have to build huge sets. They're building kind of extensions off of the screen that match up with the screen. It's so crazy what they're doing, and this is so awesome, and it means that we're gonna get a lot of really cool stuff in TV and film in the next decade, because this technology is gonna allow them to just kind of do what George Lucas was trying to do on the prequels, but not just make it a room full of blue screen. Instead, like, the actors will be in the environment, the lighting will match perfectly, because it'll be coming from the environment, and the actors will have something to play off of. So yeah, I mean, like, that tech, I think, is what's allowing them to turn this around so quickly. And it'll be I think that we'll start to see it applied not just with The Mandalorian, but I think it'll start to be used in some of the MCU stuff as well, in the next couple of years. I think that Disney is just going to be like, it's their tech, and they're just going to be using it like crazy. Like, it's ILM that's pioneering this stuff. So, yes. I guess I don't know. I guess ILM might not be part of. I don't know if ILM was still part of Lucasfilm.
It's not Lucasfilm, right? It's like its own thing, right? Isn't it?
It was part of Lucasfilm, but I think it may have split off at some point before the purchase. So
although I wonder, because I was looking for jobs at one point in time, and Lucasfilm and ILM are the same thing, but they might not be anymore. Interesting.
Anyways, so I don't know. It's funny because I feel like we know more about WandaVision. We know next to nothing about Loki. We just know that he's going to travel through time. And the rumor, can you guys hear the crying in the background? The rumor is that Kang the Conqueror, who is a time traveling villain of the Avengers, is going to be in the Loki series, but that's not confirmed yet. And that's basically all we know about Loki.
Is he the Loki? Like, is he going to be the Loki that escaped
in Endgame?
Yeah. In Endgame?
Yeah.
But, like, how does that not break all the rest of the continuity?
Nothing can break continuity because of the time travel rules that they established in Endgame. They returned back to their timeline. So their timeline is always their timeline. You can't destroy a timeline. Right. You just create tangents. You can just
compromise the other one.
It's just So this is my guess, is that the Loki series, it's going to be really straightforward. He's got the Tesseract, and he's using it to travel through time and space, and he uses it probably to travel through time at first, and then somehow through space first, and then somehow he's traveling through time as well. And creating he's going to basically start to break the time stream. And I think that Kang is going to become aware of this and come in to deal with it. And I think we'll probably see other characters who will come in to deal with it as well. There'll probably be like Kang will be the evil side, and there are many different heroes that they could choose from, but somebody will come in from the hero side to try and stop Loki, and Loki will be the anti-hero in the middle who's like, I'm just trying to survive. Like in the main timeline, I died being a hero, and so I'm not gonna be a hero, but I'm not a villain, right? So it'll kind of be his journey in figuring that out and becoming a fun anti-hero for us to enjoy. But like the great thing about the Loki series is that literally anybody can show up.
Nice.
Because it's dealing with different time periods and traveling all over the place. And it's Tom Hiddleston. We're just gonna focus on Tom Hiddleston. Who do I want to show up?
Yeah.
Tony Stark is obviously the easiest to say, but honestly, I would actually really love to see Sif come back, because we haven't seen her since Dark World. She's not in Ragnarok, and she wasn't in Endgame. Was she in the final battle in Endgame?
I don't think so.
I don't remember seeing Sif. We saw a lot of characters, but so that's a character who's been kind of conspicuously absent, and a character that I really like.
I know you didn't. Yeah, carry on.
No, her, and then honestly, I think it would be fun if they could pull in some of the Netflix characters.
Oh yeah.
By way of like time travel and like alternate reality shenanigans, where it's like, oh, okay, cool. So we're seeing them, and it's like they are MCU, but they're in an offshoot because of something that Loki did. So that's why we'll never see them alongside the Avengers, but explaining that this actually, like, they have an opportunity with this show to retcon all of the weird stuff that's happened around Shield and the Netflix shows and all that stuff that was supposed to be MCU but isn't MCU. I don't think that they'll do that, but they could. So that would be fun.
I mean, I thought it was MCU. Is it like they undid some stuff recently?
Loki is MCU.
No, I know. I thought that the Marvel shows or the
Netflix shows? No. Yeah. So they exist in a universe that acknowledges the MCU, but like what Daredevil doesn't affect Spider-Man.
Yeah, but like I thought Daredevil's world was the one that was destroyed by the attack on New York.
Yeah, yes, that's what I'm saying. Like Daredevil acknowledges the MCU, but the MCU doesn't acknowledge Daredevil. It's a one-way street.
Yeah. Fair.
So, because like crazy stuff happens in Defenders, like a whole building collapses, and like we never talk about it in the MCU. It's not important, right? But like they mention Stark, they mention Thor, like the characters exist in that world, but it might not be exactly the MCU. The other part of it that makes it difficult is that Disney isn't allowed to use those characters for a certain amount of time because of the deal with Netflix.
Right.
So I don't know when that elapses. I think it actually elapses sometime later this year. At which point, like when Loki comes out, I think they'll be able to use those characters again. And that's the only reason that I put that out there and say, like, maybe this is a way to reintroduce some of these characters. Because honestly, like, Luke Cage not getting resolved drives me nuts, because I loved that show, and season 2 ended on a cliffhanger. Charlie Cox, as Daredevil, like, he deserves to be in the MCU.
He's great.
All 4 of those all 5 or 6 of those characters, like the heroes that we developed over the course of the Netflix shows, should have been in Endgame. And I think that had Disney Plus not pissed off Netflix, that they would have been. I think that we would have seen at least Daredevil, but we should have seen all of the Defenders, including like
Jessica Jones.
Jessica Jones. She is one of the Defenders, but like Jessica Henwick's character. Oh my god, I can't remember her. Colleen Wing, right? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, those characters all should have shown up in Endgame. That's the way that it should have been. But Coulson and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. should not, because that show went off the rails and became a ridiculous nonsense show. But I know that some people will disagree with me on that. But
Probably.
yeah. Anyways, yeah. Well, all of this stuff is coming later this year, and we're gonna have a new podcast dedicated specifically to MCU stuff. So we'll get the first episode of that. It's Nuff Said, which is a very common Stan Lee-ism. But we'll get that. We'll get our first episode of Nuff Said when Black Widow comes out later this year in May. So everybody can look forward to that. And then when I have such a hard time with the title because I want to say Captain America and the Winter Soldier, but when Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when that comes out in August, we'll do regular episodes of that. So I mean, it'll only be like 4 episodes, but we'll have episodes of that, and then it's my hope is that Disney Plus is not going to air the Marvel stuff and the Star Wars series at the same time. Like that they're planning a schedule of like, okay, here's a Marvel show, and then in between this Marvel show and the next one we'll put out a Star Wars show, and they'll kind of like switch off with their original content until like later on down the road when they've kind of got their production pipeline figured out.
And everything comes out all the time.
Yeah, and it's just continuous like it is on Netflix. But my hope is that they do that so that I can switch back and forth between Nuff Said and Faster, More Intense. And like those will be sort of the 2 other shows. And then as well as Rebel Cells if they do more animated stuff. Which there are rumors that we've got another animated series coming later this year. Clone Wars just started, and the first episode of Rebel Cells will be out tomorrow if you're listening to this early, or it came out on Wednesday if you're listening to this late. So yeah, I'm really hoping that Disney Plus can cooperate with my schedule so that I only ever have to do 2 podcasts at once. But we'll see.
Sure.
We'll see. 'Cause it was a little bit crazy there with we were doing Rebel Cells, Faster, More Intense, and Quiver all at the same time, 'cause Resistance, Mandalorian, and Arrow were all airing at the same time. So there was a few weeks in there where there were 3 shows that I was supposed to be on, and I just wasn't on a lot of the Mandalorian as a result, because we have other hosts for that. The idea there is that other people are supposed to come in. So let's switch over to Sonic. Let's talk about that for a second before we get into Picard. Because this is really quick. Sonic is just destroying the box office, and it makes me super happy that that's happening, because it shouldn't. Look, by all accounts, we are living in the darkest timeline with everything else that's going on in the world. But there are just this handful of consolation prizes, to keep us somewhat happy. And one of those is that Sonic the Hedgehog has already made worldwide $202 million, which is so stupid. This movie should have been a flop. It should have just fallen completely flat with audiences. It should have been a massive disappointment. And against all odds, a live-action adaptation of Sonic the Hedgehog is doing well at the box office. It's critically well received, and the audience loves it. And I don't know what I did right to deserve this, but it makes me so happy because we're definitely gonna get a sequel. There's no way that after 2 weeks this movie made $200 million and Paramount's gonna go, yeah, you know what, we'll pass on the sequel. because the sequel will make more money because everybody will be like, I heard that first Sonic movie was really good. I'm going to go see this one. And, that'll be Sonic 2's Ball to Fumble, but which I'm pretty sure it will. Because, man, I don't know that they can pull this off twice. Because they just barely managed to balance everything. It's one of those things where you're like, if that one scene had been 5 minutes longer, it would have ruined the middle of the movie. Or if Jim Carrey had decided to do something just a little bit different, it would have ruined the movie. Or if they had gone with the original design, it would have ruined the movie. Like, it would not have had the effect that it's had. So
there's so many movies like that, though, that sometimes you watch and you're like, if this had just slightly tilted one way or the other, it would have been a completely different thing.
Filmmaking as like a collaborative medium, and I mean, like all sort of collaborative storytelling, whether it's film or animation or a TV movie, whatever format you're in, even like documentary and stuff, like it's alchemy. And you can have all of the ingredients exactly the same as something perfect. The 80s are a really great example of this. Star Wars came out in 1977, and then the 1980s are just littered with movies that are like, all right, okay, aliens, teenage hero, teenage boy hero, cool spaceships, special effects, swords, guns, roguish sidekick hero, all of the elements that are in Star Wars. If you distill them and then try and reassemble them, it doesn't necessarily make Star Wars. Sometimes you get Masters of the Universe, which is the He-Man movie, which I love, but I love it because of how bad it is and because I was a kid when I watched it, and there's nostalgia there. But objectively, it's a bad Star Wars ripoff, right? But then sometimes you get something that's really cool, like you get The Last Starfighter, which is definitely a riff on Star Wars, but has its own heart and has its own thing. So it's just, there's really no way of knowing when you put all these elements together whether or not it's actually going to come together to be something that an audience loves. Or it could end up like John Carter, where you make a great movie, but the audience just never finds it. Because a couple of critics pan it for whatever reason, right? Mostly because they're told to, right? Not that I don't think that there's a conspiracy of somebody telling critics you got to write bad reviews, but I think that the marketing geared people up to not like the movie, so they went in expecting to not like it, and so the things that don't work in the movie they seized on, as opposed to enjoying all of the many more things that do work in the movie. So it's there's never any way of telling what it's gonna be, how it's gonna come out, and for Sonic to have come out this good, it's I would say Sonic fans deserve it because they get. They're often the butt of jokes online because the Sonic games tend to be more misses than hits. It's really nice that everybody's kind of getting this moment to be happy about it. Every time I go on Instagram, the Sonic movie account has another thing of number 1 2 weeks in a row or whatever, celebrating all of the triumphs of this movie. And then on top of that, Ben Schwartz, who seems to be just a super nice guy, and has become prolific when it comes to playing voice acting characters. All of the heroes that he voices are blue, by the way. He does he's Dewey on DuckTales, the blue duck. He's Leonardo on Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and he's Sonic. And there's a whole list. There's 10 characters that he's voiced or played, and a guy made a really great video of it where he's it's a conspiracy of Ben Schwartz is trying to play every blue character ever. But I'm so excited for them to do the sequel. I really, 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 really hope that they get The Rock in the sequel. There's a joke in the movie where Sonic like wakes up and he's like, how long was I out? Is The Rock president? And The Rock saw that and was like, this looks pretty awesome. And he made one of his really sappy, he's known for these sappy sentimental posts of like, he used to play Sonic the Hedgehog when he was young on his Sega Genesis, and now the Sonic the Hedgehog movie is using him as a pop culture reference, and it's just really like, he was like, it's weird how life turns out sometimes, and now he plays Sonic games with his daughter and whatever. So I think he's game for it, and we all know that putting The Rock in your movie just makes your movie better. So I really want him to play Knuckles. I want him to be the voice of Knuckles, because that would be ridiculously awesome.
Interesting. Okay.
You have no context for like 95% of this.
I know. Okay, so here's the thing. I did a few things when I was a little girl, and one of the things was that we had two cousins. They were both boys, and we would play Sonic and Knuckles like in the backyard, where we would just like pretend to be like, and I just remember that my sister was Knuckles, and I don't think I was Sonic. I think somebody else was Sonic, like one of my cousins. But we did that, and then we would play Ninja Turtles, and I would get to be April. But like, I do definitely, like, I knew who Knuckles was, like way back. So
what are Knuckles? I'm not testing you. I want to.
You're a little gonna test me.
I want to know for myself how much of this you've retained, just for my own satisfaction. So this isn't me like trying to go like, oh, you're a fake gamer girl. I'm just like, I'll be really happy if you can tell me what Knuckles' primary powers are. What differentiates him from Sonic? Because Sonic just runs fast and does the spin dash.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
What does Knuckles do that's different?
You have like multiple tails. I don't know.
No, that's Tails. Tails has multiple tails and can fly with his tails. Tails is a fox. Knuckles is an echidna.
Oh, okay. What the frick is an echidna?
An echidna, ECHIDNA, is it's a like an anteater. It's it's from Australia, and it's got spines like a hedgehog, which is why they picked the character. I'm
thinking of Tails then. Maybe I know who Tails is, and
I think you're thinking of Tails.
I conflated it with Knuckles. Yeah. But we definitely played Sonic the Hedgehog. It's just like, I never really knew what I was doing. I was always just there.
Knuckles has claws on his knuckles that allow him to smash through certain walls and climb up other walls. And then, for some reason, Sonic's spines are the like triangle shark fin sort of thing, right? For some reason, Knuckles, his spines translate into like dreadlocks that allow him to glide. Doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense, but it's awesome. And Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the coolest characters ever created, and so are all of his friends. And I'm really excited to see them all in the sequel, along with Jim Carrey full on going Robotnik with the bald head, as we see him at the end of the movie. So.
Okay.
Sonic sequel definitely going to happen. Let's talk about Picard. Let's go from bald Robotnik to bald Patrick Stewart.
What a weird.
But I did it. So you haven't watched any of Picard yet, but have you watched Star Trek Discovery?
I watched some of Star Trek Discovery. Okay. I didn't watch all of it.
You need to continue with that, because I really feel like Discovery is up your alley. I think that especially season 2, I think you'll like it a lot.
Oh, I didn't know it got a season 2. I definitely enjoyed some of the stuff they were playing with in the first season, for sure. So,
I really like Discovery. I know that a lot of people have mixed feelings about it. Is it a good Star Trek show? I don't know about that. Is it a really good sci-fi adventure show? I think so. Picard, what to say about Picard? If you are not a hardcore Star Trek fan, I don't know that there's a lot of enjoyment to be derived from this show. Crystal has been watching it with me, and we were right as we were about to begin the third episode. I knew from some news stories, that another character from Next Generation was going to be introduced in this episode. They're going to introduce this character Hugh, who was a Borg that became separated from the Borg collective and was connected to Data, and like this is a character from season like 3 or 4 that he shows up a couple of times over the course of Next Gen, and he's very integral to sort of the lore of that was a pun, and I'm gonna say that I intended that pun. Data's brother is named Lore. It's a whole thing. Did you watch Next Gen?
My mother watched Next Gen, and it was on often when I was around. So no, I didn't watch it because it was one of those weird shows my mom watched.
Yeah.
Man, why wasn't I a nerd when I was younger? I like actively rebelled against it. Except for Star Wars.
But this character was going to be introduced in the episode, so I was like, okay, I just want to make sure that Crystal knows who this character is going into it, because I don't know how much they're going to dig into this and how much like they'll expect you to already know, because the show's been very light on sort of like retreading, right? And so I started talking to her, and in trying to explain the character of Hugh, as I kind of just did, I started to realize like I stopped and I went, Crystal, like, do you understand what the Borg are? Because they haven't explained it on the show. So I'm wondering, like I was just trying to kind of get a feel of like, was she understanding what they are based on the context clues within the story? And she started explaining what she thought they were, and I was like, whoa, we're like way off base. Like you're not following the show. And I don't think this isn't a dig against Crystal. Like she watches tons of different sci-fi and fantasy stuff with me, and she very rarely is like confused by the concepts, right? There might be like a storyline that like connects into some other thing, like what I'm talking about with Star Trek, where it's like, oh, you don't have the context for that because you never watched that original show, or we're watching these things out of order, or whatever, right? So that'll be like, those will be the places where she asks questions. Very similar to like when I was first watching the Harry Potter movies with her, and she had read all of the books, and I was just watching the movies, and every time we would walk out of a Harry Potter movie, I would be like, that didn't make sense, and that didn't make sense, and that was dumb. And she would go, yeah, but if you read the book, then this, and this. So, but like usually she's pretty like with it on whatever ridiculous sci-fi show I'm forcing her to watch, even though it's not really to her taste. But with Star Trek Picard, I was like, what are the Borg? And she started giving this explanation that was like you clearly are not understanding like that they're like a cybernetic organism virus, essentially, that like assimilates different alien species. She just thought the Borg were an alien species. And it's like, the show is very confusing if you don't understand what the Borg are. And,
right.
Like, because that's the whole thing. The whole plot is revolving around Data and the Borg. And if you don't know the backstory of Data's character and who he was to Picard and how he died and what all of that meant, and you don't understand what the Borg are as a concept, as this like collective that assimilate different species into them, and they're trying to basically spread throughout the entire universe and take over the entire universe, so that every living organism is just part of the Borg collective. If you don't understand that, then like the danger of them being on a Borg cube, which this is all stuff from the first episode, like when you see that, you see this Borg cube that's just like derelict in space. It's like, I see that and I'm like, whoa, what are they doing? This is a bad idea. Don't mess with Borg technology. Just blow that thing up. Like this is not a good idea. For Crystal, she's just like, okay, they're on a big space cube. And I'm like, this show is failing on a massive level because it's not going to bring in I don't think it's friendly to new fans. Star Trek Discovery, I think, on the flip side of that, like I think Star Trek Discovery starts you in a time period where it's like, if you're familiar with Star Trek, actually you're probably going to be more angry than if you're unfamiliar with it, and it's just kind of like giving you all of these concepts anew, and not hand-holding, but like reintroducing you to a lot of different things. And there's stuff in there that if you're a Star Trek fan, you're gonna be like, okay, cool, mirror universe, I get it. But like there's other stuff that like they're gonna, you know, like take the time organically to tell the story, because sometimes the characters in the story are learning these things for the first time as well. But in Picard, it's like everybody is all on the same page without ever having to say anything a lot of the time in this story. And so there's a lot of exposition that should happen that doesn't. And then on top of that, I just don't feel like the plot has gone anywhere in the first 3 episodes. The 4th episode is already aired and everybody says it's really good, so I need to watch it. But the first few episodes were kind of dull, I think. So I don't know. I'm hoping that it picks up and that it gets better. Discovery took a little while to get going as well, so I don't know. We'll see. I have been a little bit disappointed with it thus far, though. There's been some cool moments, but there's almost been like too many of the turn to the camera and wink, sort of like, hey, remember this thing from the Next Generation? And it's like, could you guys just maybe tell a story? And the other part of it is that Patrick Stewart is getting up there in years, and it's starting to show on screen. Like, I think his most recent prominent role was reprising Xavier in Logan, but how much of that was him acting and how much of that was him just aging, and them utilizing that to tell a good story. Because in Picard, it's like he's there's been a couple of sort of action type sequences where you're like, I'm not really buying this. But I don't know. He's also doing a fantastic job, and his performance is good, but I think his age is just starting to show.
Is it supposed to? Is it about him being retired?
He is definitely retired, and that's an element of it. But there are also some flashback scenes, so it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting experiment to see if this actor can kind of keep up with all of these younger actors. Although I will say that for the most part, this cast is middle-aged and up. There's a couple of characters that are younger, but the majority of the cast is actually more seasoned, as opposed to being your typical television series about sexy young people. Which I appreciate. I appreciate that, you know, if your main character is up there in years, then the people that he associates with should also be older. They should be more experienced. He's not going to hang out with a bunch of 20-year-olds.
It's also for like people like my mom.
Yeah.
Like be watching. I actually read an article recently where they were like, 2020 is the year of like the older woman, like with Renee Zellweger and Laura Dern getting a lot of respect and acclaim for their stuff this year, and just being like, there's a lot of ageism in Hollywood, and so it's really awesome to see like spaces being made for these older demographics to be able to like hone their craft and really just like showcase it. So
so yeah, I don't know. I'll continue to kind of check in on Picard as we go. Like I said, everybody says that the 4th episode is where it kind of kicks into high gear, and I see that because it felt like at the end of the last episode they were like, okay, we've kind of got our crew now, so let's go off on this adventure. So I can see where it's probably getting going now, but
nice.
Cool. Well, before we jump into our conversation about The Good Place, let's first stop and talk about Patreon. Before we get into our ads. So last week I kind of outlined what our new scheme with Patreon, but I misspoke and I kind of flipped the $1 and the $5 levels. So what you'll get now, if you pledge over at patreon.com/thunderquack, at the $1 a month level, you get access to the Facebook group, and you get early access to the Thunderquack podcast on Tuesdays. That's the version of the Thunderquack podcast with ads. So you're getting it early, but it still has ads in it. At the $5 level, you are getting access to the Facebook group, obviously, but then you're also getting early access to the ad-free version of the Thunderquack podcast. At the $10 level, you get the Thunderquack podcast uncut, which doesn't have ads, and you get that on Tuesdays. So that's our extended version, where it's usually where we will have conversations that are a little bit more tangent oriented and a little bit less focused. And it's I don't know, some people seem to like that. So that's at the $10 level. And then the $20 level, we actually took what was the $50 level, the Patreon producer, and moved it down to $20. So the $20 level is now where you get your Patreon producer shout out on the Thunderquack podcast every week. So here we go. Our first Patreon producer is Brian Morawski. So thank you, Brian, for supporting us on Patreon as a Patreon producer. And if you want to be shouted out as a Patreon producer, you can do that by subscribing at the $20 level. Or you can give us more money than that if you want to. Anything above $20 is going to get you a Patreon producer credit. So thanks, Brian. Thank you to everybody who's supporting us on Patreon. I have people are adjusting their pledges in accordance with the new setup, and that makes me feel pretty good because people are adjusting their pledges up. I haven't seen anybody adjust their pledge down yet, so that's a good sign. But as you guys know, Patreon is what's kept the lights on for the last little while, and going into the next phase of Thunderquack, Patreon's still a big part of that, and we couldn't do it without all you guys and your support. So thank you. Awesome. With that, let's hear some ads. Okay, are you ready to talk The Good Place?
I am so ready to talk.
So ready. As long as you're not actually dying over there on the other end of the microphone.
I know, no, it's terrible. I don't want. I don't want to die from the cold.
I think you're gonna be all right.
I hope so. Well, okay. The thing that really sucks though is that I went and got the rest of my vaccine on Wednesday. I had gotten Twinrex before I went to Indonesia, and then I needed to get the second dose of it. And so I went in, but I was already feeling a little bit woozy in the morning, and I didn't eat. And so I got the vaccine and immediately walked out and almost fainted in the hallway, and then basically haven't felt good since. So I feel like maybe my body was just immunocompromised or something, because it got it had extra things that it was trying to deal with, and then it's just not quite bounced back in the way that it was supposed to.
I'm also gonna say that much like a Chidi and a Gonye, that you push yourself way too hard and you do way too much. None of it to help me with Thunderquack, but that's fine. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. But seriously, you as a producer are all over the place doing so many things for so many people on so many projects that I think you just collected enough debt on your body that it has just said to you, enough. Lay down for a few days, please.
True.
So,
but you know what? It didn't even stop me from going and doing this weekend another pitch video for a telephone application. so funny.
Terrible.
No, it was terrible because I was like, I can't really come do this, but it's like impossible to do stuff that like requires your presence. Anyways, but I skipped a bunch of stuff this weekend, so I'm going to get better. It'll be fine.
You will be fine. You are going to get better. You're a healthy person.
Okay, good. Well,
you might have a cold right now. It doesn't mean you're an unhealthy human being.
That's fair.
Could you be in better health? Yes, we all could. But who's got the time? The Good Place. It's all wrapped up. I hope everybody has had a chance to finish watching The Good Place. If you haven't,
please don't listen to this.
Yeah, don't listen to this. We're gonna go right into spoilers because I don't think there's not a lot to talk about in the last season other than the last like 3 or 4 episodes. So, but
The Good Place, like if you don't know what it's about, you don't know what it's about. Yeah. And it's like a thing that like anybody who hasn't finished the first season, you don't know what The Good Place is about. Yeah. And like it's like this weird thing where somebody was like, "Oh," I was like, "Well, do you know what it's about?" And they're like, "Yeah, like about like moral absolutism and all that stuff." I was like, "Wait, have you finished the first season?" They're like, "No, I'm like halfway through." I was like, "Okay, no, you don't know what The Good Place is about." Yeah. Like you have to finish the first season to get it. Anyways. So that's a rant. So now nobody's listening to this that hasn't finished the first season of The Good Place.
Yeah. So how did you feel about the finale?
I like it when shows get to end on their own terms. Mm-hmm. And that was nice to see. I mean, it is kind of sad, but it also like makes sense the way that they ended it. Yeah. What else was I watching? I was watching something else recently where I was like, hey, that's really similar to The Good Place in that like if you don't have anything to like work towards or to stop you, that life just becomes like intolerable basically, which was kind of like a really interesting conceit. Oh man, now I'm wondering what it was that I was watching where it was like about an immortal or something.
Probably something Korean.
You know what? Yeah, I'm kind of going through my brain now being like, I have watched a lot of Korean dramas recently. It is likely.
I am going to be an unpopular person and say that I didn't like the last season. I did not enjoy myself.
Because they finally got to The Good Place and you're like, why?
No, I don't even think it was that. I just think that the show probably should have been a little bit tighter and ended a season earlier. Because I think that last season went on a little bit too long with the being alive again.
Interesting.
That they could have wrapped that a little bit quicker and then done everything that they did in this season in the number of episodes they would have had left. Huh. Because I just like this season especially felt like there was a lot of let's stretch this part of the story out a little bit. Like let's take this one concept and make it the whole episode so that we can save the punch for the last episode. Because they really, that's what they did. Like a lot of there's a lot of Scooby-Doo running through doors. Do you know what I'm referencing? Like those sequences in Scooby-Doo where like they run through one door and then out, and you're just like the camera's just on the hallway, and it's just we're just using the same animation for the characters to go from one door to another door, and we're just gonna see all 15 characters run through doors for a solid minute. And that to me, like that's what a lot of the last season felt like, was them going like, and then everything is fine, but what about this problem? And it was like, okay, cool. Yeah. Every time they turn around and think that they've solved the thing, there's another thing. I mean, and it gets to the point where like they make a joke about it towards the end of the season. And it is one of those things for me. It's very similar to when you put a character in something, and Good Place is actually guilty of this, but they pull it off, where you put a character in that's like, oh my God, this character is so annoying to the characters in the show. And everybody on the show acknowledges how annoying this character is. And it's like, why would you... Janice is a good example of this. Janice in Friends, right?
No, she's so classic, though. Everybody loves Janice.
But she is obnoxious and annoying and incongruous with the show because everybody else is a fairly serious character most of the time, except for maybe Joey.
How did we not talk about that being big news?
Oh yeah, well, because it's not. It's such non-news. It's unscripted. It's gonna be them sitting in chairs talking about how it changed their lives. I don't care. I don't care about seeing all 6 of them on stage together. I want to know what happened to their characters. Yeah, I don't want unscripted stuff. I want another episode. I want another season of Friends. Yeah. What I really want from Friends, just this is a perfect Thunderquack tangent while we're in the middle of trying to talk about The Good Place. Well, I'm trying to make a point, but what I really want from Friends is I want Chandler and Monica's show, and then I want the other characters to show up every once in a while.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? Because I want to see where they're at now. How long has it been since the twins were born? They're
like 18. They're
adults now, right?
They're adults, yeah.
So what I want to see is like the empty nests version of Friends, where it's like they all went their separate ways because they all like Rachel and Ross had their kid and sorted their stuff out when they finally figured it out. That was, okay, well now their story is no longer relevant because now they're just going to raise a kid, right? And argue with each other all the time, but raise a kid. And Chandler and Monica finally have their family, so they're gonna go off and do their thing. Which and Phoebe and Mike presumably would do the same thing, because that's in the last season what she realizes, like, oh, I do want to be a soccer mom. Yeah. So everybody goes off and does their thing except for Joey, who gets his own show that tanks, but whatever. Like it like he got his show where he was supposed to go find his fulfillment in California, and let's pretend like he did. He doesn't, because that show got canceled. Like, I think it got 2 seasons, but it was not good.
And we're okay with that.
Yeah,
we just forget that it happened.
So the perfect thing to do would be, now that all of their kids are adults and have grown up and are like going off to college or whatever, have everybody come back together.
Yeah.
And be like, well, like basically you would start the show with Chandler and Monica taking the twins off to college and being like,
it's not, okay, wait, hang on. It hasn't been 18 years. It's been like 16 years.
Has it been 16 years?
I don't think it's been 18. Maybe it has, though. Man.
I think it has.
That's insane. How old are we, dude?
Yeah. I think that's the whole point. I think it, like, this HBO thing is going to be like the 20th anniversary. So anyways, in any case, like this should be the show, is that they take their kids off to college, drop them off, and then go home, and then you just have a scene of them just like sitting for like a solid 30 seconds in silence, and then Chandler's just like, so what are we supposed to do now? Because that's what happens to parents. Like it becomes your whole life.
Like that. My mom wants a show like that. My mom's like, why can't they just have shows about people who had kids and then they don't have kids anymore?
Yeah.
And they just like, I mean, because my parents just like travel around the world with their friends.
And so that would be like, that would be the show, is that Chandler and Monica would be like, I guess now we have time to do everything we always wanted to do. And then the joke is like, well, what do you want to do? And then they just turn the TV on and watch something on Netflix, right? Yeah. Like, it writes itself. And then you just have to check in with everybody else. And that's an 8-episode, half-hour episode miniseries on whatever you want to put it on. And we just check in with every character. Because you wouldn't just check in with Ross and Rachel and Phoebe and Mike and whatever. You would also want to have an episode where you see what has become of Janice, and if she's still married to somebody, or how many kids she has now. And you want to check in with Gunther and Central Perk and everything. Like, there are a ton of characters that you could have stopped by, or they go to them or whatever. And that's what I want, and we're never gonna get that. But I mean, like, we should. I don't know what Courtney Cox is doing. Matthew Perry's not doing anything. So, like,
they're just rolling around in the millions of dollars.
Well, that is kind of the bigger thing, is that they don't have to do anything. Matthew Perry is such a conundrum to me, because he is such a good actor, but the last couple of things that he did, I don't know if he is just like on some sort of mood altering drug that just makes him not care about anything. But The Odd Couple, which is the most recent show that he did. I mean, I guess he was in.
Was he in 60 Rock or something like that? Like something good, Sunshine, something. I don't know. He was into Studio 60 on the Sunset.
There you go. 30 Rock was the other show, and Studio 60 was the other. Was when he was on. Yes, but that was a long time ago, and he's had like 3 sitcoms since then. And then he was on it was like an HBO thing about the Kennedys or something. He played one of the Kennedys. But yeah, like, he really hasn't done a ton, but when he, like, The Odd Couple, it was so weird because he was just like standing on stage saying the lines and not really acting. It was like community theater level of like, well, he showed up, I guess. But he's also the biggest name on the show.
So I really enjoyed 17 Again.
I love 17 Again. That's the movie that turned me around on Zac Efron.
Oh, no way.
Because before that, I was like, oh, that stupid High School Musical kid, whatever, I don't even care. And then I watched 17 Again, and it's great because he just does a Matthew Perry impersonation the whole movie.
So good.
Which you're like, at first you're like, okay, he's going to play a young version of Matthew Perry, whatever. And then you realize, like, oh, wait, Matthew Perry is super easy to imitate because he has his mannerisms and way of speaking. And you could tell that, like, he just watched a bunch of Friends and just did that. And that's a great movie. That's like, because it's reverse big. And it's a great reverse big film.
Nice. Dude. Yeah. Cougar Town was good. Like, the Courtney Cox show, like, they had like 102 episodes or something.
I did not enjoy Cougar Town personally, but I understand that other people did.
I didn't watch it, but I'm sure that it was, to keep it around that long, I'm sure it was fine.
I'm sure it was fine, yes. So The Good Place. Getting back to that.
So anyways, yes, so when they have really annoying characters.
Yeah. Oh, well, so like what I was talking about was like that premise of like, it got obnoxious how many times they thought, we did it, we've solved the problem, now we're in the good place. No, you're not, you're in the bad place. No, you're not, you're in the medium place. No, you're not, you're in a different place. It's like every time they thought that they did it, then the episode ends with a bazinga, right?
I don't remember that being a trope.
It definitely was. And then there is a joke, like Ted Danson makes a joke of like, towards the end of the season where they're like they're in the good place, and he's like, I don't know what to do now. Like, right. I keep expecting, like, every time we solved a problem before, another problem would pop up, but now we did it. And it's like, I get that. Like, that is sort of the ultimate state of them, and then they're in the good place for eternity and realize that the thing that they need is a not eternity. I
don't know. I think the last 2 episodes were really good. Like the what is it? The Patty episode with Lisa, speaking of Friends, Lisa Kudrow in a fantastic cameo. Yeah. Which I love so much. But the Patty episode, I thought actually was the finale. Like, I thought it could have been the finale. Like, that could have been what it was. But I really like that they gave it an extra episode to like see them all like make their choices. But I don't know. I think that I don't know. I liked that worked, and I liked that Michael got to be like a character, like he got to grow into himself. Like in many ways, it was sort of like Michael's story, which was cool.
I do like it's not that I don't like what they did. I think that personally, I became exhausted by the show a little bit because it's joke, and then they would punctuate the jokes with sadness. And then the last episode was very few jokes and just a lot of sadness. And I was like, I've grown to love these characters, and now it just feels a little bit like you're just bumming me out. The last episode is it's just a bummer, and it deserves to be because everybody is just choosing to die. So like that's the scenario that they write themselves into with this plot. And so there's really no other way out of it. And it's not like it's not
supposed to
like
be bittersweet though.
It's not I was gonna say it's not tearjerker sad, but it's bittersweet. But a bittersweet is a bummer. It's like, okay, well, I like these characters. I don't want to just see them walk off into eternity. The only moment in the finale that I'll say that I really, really, really enjoyed was towards the end when you find out that Jason has just been hanging out in the forest for like 100 years or something like that. Like he just
probably way more than that.
Yeah, he just like he became the monk that he was pretending to be in the first season.
It was very cool.
I was like, and then he was like, okay, cool, see you later, and then walked through the door. And it was like, okay, that's really cool.
Jason Mendoza is like my favorite character on television in a really long time.
He's a great character, and
I love him so much.
If you see that actor, if you see him talk, it's like that's a character. He is acting his butt off.
Is so great, but totally different from Jason, and it's so awesome. And he's from Vancouver, hey?
Is he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. He awesome. Went to UBC and everything, I think.
That's awesome. So yeah, I don't know. Like overall, I love the series, and probably like once season 4 is on Netflix and I have the chance to kind of go through it and knowing where it's going and knowing what happens and just kind of enjoying it for what it is, I'll probably rewatch it and enjoy it more. But yeah, it.
I guess
it bummed me out. It just bummed me out. I just think I was probably not in the space for it, and that's probably all that it is. Is that like I probably felt like I probably wanted Brooklyn Nine-Nine and was getting The Good Place, right? Because Brooklyn Nine-Nine has its moments. I'm like, man, there's an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine that is like is a bummer too, but I for the most part, Nine-Nine is just silly hijinks, and that's kind of what I want, but.
I think just because it was one of the only shows that I was watching regularly as it left and was like preparing myself for it to end for a few weeks, that I went into the season finale very much ready to sort of be like, how do you end a show about dead people?
Yeah.
like what is the like final thing? And I think that part of what makes it really interesting is that it spoke to, because I'm like not really a religious person, but it was kind of nice that it spoke to this sort of unanswerable question at the end of it, right? Where it's like, as much as they created this world where they're like, okay, this is what happens to you when you die. But then they actually created this whole other thing where they're like, well, actually, why don't we just not know what happens to you when you actually like go off to like, so, which I just thought was like an interesting way to deal with that. And also like really like it makes you really contemplative and to think about just like the expanse of time and how like such a goofy concept of Baramies, like it was so many Baramies later that you're like, you really have no concept. Like, have they been there for tens of thousands of years? Had they been there for a couple hundred? And then you're like, well, what would be the extent of life that you would like? I just thought it would like really made me like really reflected and like that like idea of like, if you could have, and how cool is it that Tahani just gets to be Tahani? Like, there was never a thing in it where she was, like, in any way, like, unsatisfied not having a soulmate or, like, just who she was. And she just gets to sort of be herself. And I just think that that's so cool in the end for Tahani to just, like, I don't know. I just think there was so many things to like about it that I forgive it for its other flaws.
I'm not even considering it flaws. It just didn't work for me personally. Like it just bummed me out more than I wanted to be bummed out. And like that's all it is. Like I still think that it's one of the best TV shows ever written. Like it's so smart and unapologetic about that, and doesn't like take its audience for granted. Like I think that, and I think maybe that might be part of what I think I love it for that, but it also feels a little bit in the last season. It felt a little bit, I guess, performative. Of like they know that like the show shouldn't have gone on 4 seasons. Like how did this show get to be 4 seasons on network? Like if it were a Netflix show or an Amazon Prime show, that would be one thing. But it was on NBC.
Yeah.
Yeah, well like who would have thought, if you had told me that this show on paper was going to be something that NBC would back and see through to its conclusion. I mean, like the other show that I put in the same echelon as this, and this tells you how much I like The Good Place, is Community. And Community to me is the greatest sitcom ever.
Right.
And like, what did they do to Community? They screwed that show over at every turn. Right. I mean, like that's also Sony. Like there are multiple people at play there, and it's from a different time period. And I think that The Good Place gets to be The Good Place because Community went before it, right? And like I've talked about this before, but the final moments of Community when it's like the Community, the board game, and Dan Harmon is the voiceover, and he goes into his whole thing of like that the show, like you're playing this game that's a meta game about a TV show about a community college, and like this is all like in the disclaimer of like some things may not be as they seem because meta, and like he's explaining it all, and he's like, and it might turn out that the network cancels you 3 times and then they bring you back and then you're saved by a online streaming service where you find out that what ratings told you were 10,000 people was actually 10 million people watching your show the whole time, and you never should have been canceled in the first place, and maybe you did make the greatest show of all time. And like it's because Community went through that, The Good Place gets to have 4 seasons. Right because NBC goes like, okay, well we're actually probably going to make a lot more money off of this show off of the back end, with like Blu-ray sales and streaming rights and people watching this. Like I think when Community came out, the long tail of television didn't exist. Like Friends wasn't on Netflix at that point, right?
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Like we didn't have that concept yet. Of Arrested Development was still on TV. So it wasn't on Netflix yet. But when Community came out, I don't know if Netflix was really much of a thing. I think Netflix was they mailed you DVDs when Community started, right?
Community's not that old, is it?
Community came out it started a long time ago. It's been a while. It's 6 seasons, and it's been off the air for a while. I'll look this up while we're talking, but
I guess so.
Netflix hasn't been a thing 2009 to 2015. So
when Community was on?
Yeah.
That's only like 5 years ago. 9 to 2015. That's actually a pretty long time. But I guess he had started in 2009, which would have been like, you're right. Like when it was starting, it wasn't really.
And then when was so season 4 of Arrested Development, which I would say marks the beginning of TV on streaming platforms, like for real,
Right. Yeah. When they actually like bring
is
them back.
2013.
Huh.
So that's 4 years into Community's run before people start to realize that there's an audience online and that streaming services and blah blah blah. So yeah, what was I saying about that before I got distracted by the technical part of it? But anyways, that
Community paved the way for
so like the long tail of television, right? Like now we kind of knew at that point because everybody had their DVD box sets of The OC and Friends and Smallville. Those were mine. And Scrubs and whatever and 30 Rock, and they like we were starting to realize like just because it doesn't have ratings, which is a weird abstraction of how many people are watching a show, doesn't mean that it doesn't have an audience of hardcore dedicated followers, not an insignificant number, right? Because I think like that was the conception before, was that like, yeah, okay, well this show has like a hardcore fan base that's gonna mail in Mars bars to the network to try and get another season.
Tabasco sauce bottles.
Yeah.
Woo.
And I think like now we know that for every one of those nut jobs that'll mail something to a network, which I would include myself amongst those nut jobs, and back things on Kickstarter and whatnot, that there are probably 1,000 other people who also love that show and will watch it when it's available, like when it's made available to them. But they're not going out of their way to mail things, but they do care. Like it is part of their life, and they do care enough to seek it out when it's made available to them. Yeah. And now we know that. Now we know that exists, and now shows like The Witcher can be produced and put on Netflix, and Stranger Things, a show about kids in the 1980s fighting John Carpenter monsters from a Dungeons and Dragons game. Like that's a show that's going to get 4 seasons, right? We live in a very different time now, and so I guess like NBC is maybe smart enough to recognize that when they've got a good thing. I mean, like they saved Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well, which they produced originally and then Fox aired, and then when Fox dropped it, they picked up Nine-Nine. So, and to continue the series on, knowing that this show is huge on Netflix. This show is like, we sell t-shirts, right? Like we make money off of this show other than the advertising. That advertising used to be the model, and now advertising, like who cares about advertising? Direct to consumer is the model.
Yeah.
Right. That's what Star Trek is experiencing, is like, we don't have to go through CBS. I mean, it is through CBS because it's CBS All Access, but like we don't have to worry about advertisers not wanting to back an esoteric sci-fi show about the nature of humanity because there's enough people out there who care about the show that if we put it out, they're going to buy the Blu-ray, they're going to buy action figures, they're going to buy t-shirts, they're going to go to conventions. Like we're going to make money off of this show in the long term.
Right.
So it's a worthwhile investment if you can invest, right?
Right.
So I don't know. It's but it is still weird to me, having grown up in that old system and still being accustomed to that, and I would say gun shy as a result. Like when I watched the first episode of The Good Place, not really knowing what it was, just tuning in because it was Kristen Bell and Ted Danson.
Yeah. Watched
that first episode, and I think like Crystal and I finished that first episode, and I turned to her and I was like, there's no way this show goes past 2 seasons. There's no way this show, like, because at the time I think it was like there would be 4 episodes and then maybe it would get picked up to series.
Right.
And I was like, we'll be lucky if they finish this season. And then it kept going, and then the season ended on the cliffhanger of like, whoa, you're not in The Good Place. And I was like, they better pick this up. And I think the news came pretty quick of like, yeah, we're gonna do a season 2. But I 4 seasons, and for them to actually get to tell their story, and to go out, like you said, on their own terms, because I think that they probably could have gone 5, but they decided that season 4 would be their last season. Yeah, I don't know. We are living in the golden age of television, and it's really great, but it's all just a distraction from what's going on in our world and the decay of Western civilization. So enjoy it.
Yeah, I watched Last Week Tonight with John Oliver.
Yeah,
Just it's like the one thing I've watched today. I'm trying to focus on, and he was basically talking about how Trump's he's going to India this week for his first visit to actual India, and then but basically,
what's he gonna do? Do they have McDonald's in India? Is it the same? How's he gonna survive? He's gonna come back like 50 pounds later.
That's terrible. But anyways, he was talking about how Trump called. I guess there's a guy, like the guy that's Modi is someone that's like who he's meeting with when he's in India.
Yeah.
Who's the PM and is doing like terrible things.
Politics in India is scary.
Yeah. And Trump called him like the father of India, which first of all, sorry, Gandhi. But yeah, like there's like a lot of like tension, like religious tension right now in India. Yep. And so it's just like, it was really like scary. And kind of like the fact that Trump is like heralding this guy as like somebody that he really admires. You're like, oh my God, we are so close to just the absolute worst timeline. Like, yep. It's so true. And it's just, although I will say, go Canada, go for all of the protests. They are shutting down everything. What is it? Wet'suwet'en? I'm sorry that I don't know how to say it.
Wet'suwet'en, yeah.
Wet'suwet'en. And like the protests for like land defenders and things like that, which is really shutting down the country right now. So people are listening.
Yeah.
So I hope that our country at least starts to become a little bit better and listen to the people of the land.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a balance that kind of needs to be maintained. I'm gonna sound like a Star Wars character, but and it's super far out of whack right now, and it's out of whack. I think because of the internet. Like, let's be really clear. What we're doing right now is a part of it, and we probably have definitely contributed to it. The internet has allowed people to find their tribes in a society where we have pretended like we've shed tribalism, right? Like Western society likes to pretend that we're melting pots and cultural mosaics and all of that stuff, but and everybody is an individual, like we've all become individuals as opposed to family units and villages and all of that sort of thing, right? But we're social creatures, so we find it in other ways, and the internet has given us the ability to find our tribe regardless of geography. And that's awesome. I love it. The people that we are currently talking to that are a part of our community with Thunderquack, like there are some people in our community, there are some people who just listen to the podcast, and we appreciate those people too. But there are some people that are in our Facebook group or on Twitter or whatever other like social platforms that we're available on and active on that interact with us on a regular basis. And to me, like, some of those people over the last few years have become family to me, right? And that's awesome, and that's powerful, and that's really cool. But the dark side of that is that we're also able to create these echo chambers where our confirmation bias is fed, and it's in a loop of just like it's like gluttonous feeding of like just continually like posting your SJW stuff and having your same 15 friends like it and then post it to their Facebook. And I'm guilty of this too. Like I am part of it, but and like it happens on the flip side of it. Like it happens on the left, it happens on the right. And it's creating this rift in between it's always been there, because it's not like people haven't always felt this stuff, but both sides are emboldened to go to the extreme with it. And not nobody, but I'm talking in extremes. I'm talking in hyperbole and absolutes, but there's not a system of checks and balances to keep everything running.
Yeah.
Like to your point, like land protesters are land defenders are shutting down Canada. The trains aren't running on time. Society is being impeded because of these protests. Now, I am on the side of these protests for several reasons. The environment is a big part of it. The other part of it is the sovereignty of these nations that the United Nations has acknowledged, and that Canada says that it acknowledges, and yet
doesn't.
Like what Trudeau, our prime minister, said was that the rule of law has to be acknowledged. It has to be followed. And my response to that is like, yeah, but only when the rules are the white people rules.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the rule of law that we defend. We don't defend the rule of law of people with copper skin, right? They don't count. We don't make sure that they have clean running water. We don't make sure that they have access to social assistance programs that could maybe help with some of the problems in their communities, right?
I thought it was really funny that one of the things that people were saying, they're like, do you realize that these blockades on the trains will mean that we won't have the chlorine to be able to get our water purified, which means you're going to have to boil your water. And then like these indigenous communities are like, ooh.
Yeah, like we've been doing for 27 years. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right number, but whatever. Everybody gets my point. Yeah, it's I am of the firm belief that Canada and the United States are too large to be governed. That the right thing to do is to break up our federal governments and like break it down into the territories that they are, and that in that process indigenous communities should be given full sovereignty, not fake sovereignty. Like we say the word sovereignty and it's lip service. It's like, oh, here you can have your sovereignty, which means that you guys get to elect your own leaders. And it's like, well, yeah, everybody gets to elect their own leaders. We call it a mayor, they call it a chief. It's like the difference being that like we have stolen the land and they were here first. Like those are the main differences. And then what the idea of sovereignty has allowed the Canadian government, and I'm sure I don't know as much about the American government and the way that that's been structured, but I see the same result, so I'm sure that it's the same thing. It allows them to go like, well, we're not going to help you with that.
Sure. You
said you wanted your sovereignty, here you have it. It's like, well, yeah, but we're still part of Canada.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And like we'll talk about it on the campaign trail, but nobody's actually going to do anything about any of your problems. And like the thing that drives me nuts is that these communities are often adjacent to white communities that don't have the same problems.
Mm.
Right? And it's there's so much bad blood, and there's so much historical
I'm sorry.
It's okay. There's so much like hurt on the side of the indigenous communities that it like
reconciliation is dead. That's like the biggest thing that people are saying.
It's
just
I don't know. And like it's really hard for me because I obviously identify as a white person and I present as a white person, but I am part of an indigenous tribe. Like I'm like I am Tahltan. That's my heritage. It's not that far removed from me. Like my grandma grew up in that community and then was taken from that community, and like that. So like this stuff, it means a lot to me. Yeah. Because I have that personal connection to it. but it's very similar to the argument of like when a man says, oh, it wasn't until I had a daughter that I really started thinking about how women are treated. It's like, well, that's too late, and you're a shitty person for not doing it before then. I just swore on the podcast. That's fine. I'll allow it. It's PG-13.
We're talking about politics.
Yeah. You should have cared about women as human beings before you were responsible for a human being. I like to think that I became aware of women's rights and the importance of them before my daughters were born. So hopefully I have a leg to stand on in that argument. But I know that it does matter more to me now that I have 2 daughters, and I fight harder now. And I know that I fight harder on these sorts of things. So because of my personal connection, I just hope that other people who don't have that personal connection can also try and put themselves in the shoes of these communities. And honestly, like when we talk about these indigenous communities, I think that like what also has to be acknowledged is urban communities, especially in the United States, that deal with a lot of the same problems, even though they are inside of community like city, like New York City, where other people in that city have access to everything to make their lives better. And then urban communities, predominantly Black and Hispanic and Latino communities, are treated as other and not given the same access and not given the same resources to succeed. So it's just, we're just screwing up as a society in general and failing so many of these people. And that divide is just making that even harder to fix, harder to rectify. I don't know. I have no solution. The only solution that I have access to is talking about it like this and hoping that some of the people that listen to the podcast, because they want to hear us talk about nerdy stuff, also hear this.
Still talking. Well, yeah.
And then we can start a dialogue about it, because I'm sure that there are people who are on that more right-wing side who disagree with a lot of what I said. I'm sure that there's also probably our more left extreme friends who would want to take me to task for some of the language that I've used or the sentiments that I've expressed. So like but the problem, I think, is when we don't open the dialogue and we just shout at a person and then walk away. And we write people off. Like I have friends within the Thunderquack community, within the Star Wars community, that are Trump supporters, that are not necessarily Trump supporters, but like right wingers and stuff like that. They like they're still my friends. We have a connection because of something else, and I have to be able to maintain that friendship, because if I don't, then everything is lost, right? Like
can just, I mean, it's isn't that like we've talked about that before, about how like sometimes the people that can make the biggest difference are the ones that are closest to you, and like being friends with someone doesn't mean that you agree with everything that you say, but you can call them out in ways that other people can't. Yeah. Which is why those friendships are important, and why, especially when we're talking about women's issues, why men's friendships are important too. Talk about Weinstein being sentenced. Yeah. So, there are some like glimmers of hope in the chaos, and we just got to keep moving forward, I think, as best we can.
I feel like it's trending in the right direction, but like when Trump was elected, things felt like they were trending in the right direction, and so people got complacent. And Democrats didn't go out and vote, and Hillary supporters didn't go out and vote, and people voted for independents thinking that their vote didn't matter, when what we really needed was everybody to stand up against bigotry and hatred and all of that stuff. And now we find ourselves in the situation that we're in, because I think that a lot of people, good people, did nothing or took a neutral stance intentionally, and that's not what we need. We need good people with good hearts and common sense to stand up and fight for stuff. So I don't know. It is an election year. We're going to talk about this a lot. This is going to be a big When I say election year, it's an American election year. Yeah. So this is everybody's chance to fix it, to move things back towards. It's not even about left or right. It's just about like basic human compassion, not locking up children, putting them in cages, and adopting them out to people when they have families. Yeah. Anyways, let's end on that note. Speaking of the good place being a bummer, let's us be a bummer. Cool. We're going to take next week off because, Amanda, do you want to talk about why we're going to take next week off?
Because I'm going to be going to New York City for the international premiere of The Butterfly Effect. So the animated film that I did this year as part of Women in Animation and Women in View, 5 in Focus program. We got selected for the New York Children's International Film Festival. Very exciting for that. And so it's already started. So there was one screening already last weekend, but we're going to go down for the industry weekend, which is next weekend. So there's some new panels and events that we're going to go attend. And then our screenings, we have 2 screenings. One of them's already sold out. Very exciting. But if you're in New York City, come check it out, 5:30 at the SVA Theater in New York City in the Chelsea area on March the 1st. And so me and Steph, the director, are going to be down there, and there's a Q&A after it. And I'm going to hang out with my friend. That's actually like one of the more exciting parts that I'm excited for, is that she's going to come pick me up from the airport. I'm just going to go like hang out with her and her cats. And I guess her husband as well. But like, we're just going to like drink wine and eat pizza and just hang out. So I hope I'm feeling better, because I have to take a freaking red eye, and I just like, ugh.
And if people aren't going to be in New York, they can go to spectacle5films.com and check out the trailer, right?
Yes, because Mike made me a beautiful website. Thank you.
It's on its way to being a beautiful website.
Yeah.
It's still a work in progress, but you can go watch the trailer and see some stills and stuff like that. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, that's it for the Thunderquack podcast this week. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you to everybody who supports us online. You can check out all the other great podcasts in the Thunderquack podcast network by heading to thunderquack.com. And you can follow Thunderquack on Facebook at facebook.com/Thunderquack. I think I need to know these better. I did just change Twitter to Thunderquack Pod from Thunderquacknet. So it's at Thunderquack Pod. So change when you're tagging us, tag accordingly. Not that many people do, but that has changed. And we are on Instagram at Thunderquack Net. I don't know.
Funny. It's so funny to watch.
Just go search the things. Oh, I wanted to talk about this Project Luminous thing, and I totally forgot about it, and it's all been launched now and announced, and it's really exciting Star Wars stuff. So tune into Rebel Cells, which is either coming out or has come out this week already, where Matt and I will talk a lot about Project Luminous and the first episode of the Clone Wars. Of the new season. You can follow me on Facebook. No, don't follow me on Facebook. Don't do that. Just because there's nothing to follow on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Arkwolf, ARKWULF.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Akonkin, AKONKIN, and you can add an 86 to that for Instagram.
And of course, if you like what you hear, you can support us in 2 ways. First, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch. And second, by going to patreon.com/thunderquack and kicking in with your monthly pledge of support and getting some cool rewards, which I already talked about right before the ad break. So thank you for listening. Thank you, everybody, for your continued support, especially as we're in this transition to ad-supported and moving some stuff around and all that sort of stuff. It's really nice to know that everybody still has our backs and wants to listen to the content, even if there are obnoxious ads. I know ads are so obnoxious. Just hit the skip 30-second thing on your podcast player. Or maybe just listen to them, because you never know. You might want to buy something. Consumerism. Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode of the Thunderquack podcast.
Yeah.